Welcome back to Digging Deeper. You definitely won't want to miss today's episode. We talked to Scott Maldonado. I don't remember his title, and we talked to Seth Becker, but just know they're both experts in the field of training recruiters. This is probably the most important episode we've ever done. All right, so today we're going to talk about recruiter mentoring. And training your recruiters, and how important are recruiters to the process of bringing in drivers. Now, I think a good way to think about this is a little stat that you showed me way back in the day. We called it the Efficiency Formula. And if you are familiar with Randall Riley or go to our website, you've probably seen it because we've been talking about it nonstop for about 3 or 4 years. And I'll do a quick synopsis of it. So essentially, and I'm imagining all the graphics, if we got the efficiency formula, you got all your leads coming in, and you got total leads, right? And then of those total leads, you got to try and get in contact with them, right? And then of the leads you try to contact, certain of them are going to be qualified or unqualified. Everybody's with me, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
You guys with me? Everybody's with me? All right. And then of those, of the ones that you talk to that are qualified, there's how many of those can you actually schedule for orientation? And then beyond that, there's how many actually show up for orientation, how many are actually hired at orientation, and then how many actually get seated in a truck. So that's kind of a big breakdown. So hopefully everyone's kept up with that. Now, if we were to take all those areas and say, what is the one area of improvement that would have the most profound impact on any part of how many drivers we bring in, the answer, and I'll let Seth give the punchline since it's his punchline. What's the punchline?
It is the step where we're scheduling them for orientation, committing them to come work with us.
Right. And how much more profound of an effect on average would that have for a fleet than the other areas?
You can actually do the math on it. I don't know off the top of my head. If you
go
assign,
to the website, do the math.
Yeah, 5 percentage points to each step,
right,
and you just crunch the numbers. I mean, it's amazing how many hires it adds at the end.
Yeah, I think when I did the math using kind of like stock numbers for that would kind of resonate with most fleets. I think it was like, if you could bump up how many people you were qualified drivers that you talked to, if you could bump up that number that you scheduled for orientation, you could bump that number up by 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Compared that to 5% in every other area, it was like 3 to 4 times the effect of every other area.
Yeah.
Not that we shouldn't be fixing the other areas, but
sure,
just know, I think you can say for most people, your biggest area for improvement to bring in more drivers would be essentially the phone call. It's
conversation.
It's how you're talking to drivers.
I think you guys are both definitely spot on. It's important to know, and everybody in the industry knows this already, is when you look at your lead funnel, we want to immediately fix. You told me to turn the phone off, didn't you? There you go. It's off now.
We'll edit
let me
that
take
out.
This watch off right here and just get rid of that thing. All right. So you look at the lead funnel and you look at, hey man, how many did we contact? Or we ask our recruiting team, hey, let's get out there and let's improve every area. It's almost impossible. You want to focus on that one area that both you gentlemen are talking about now, and that's getting the yes. It's getting the actual driver, he or she, to say, yes, I'm interested.
All right. And so both of you have not only your own personal experience in helping recruiters at the fleet you were working with become better. You both have that personal experience, but you've also, and especially you, have tons of experience helping other fleets do that same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have been blessed and been, I don't want to say lucky enough, but I have. I've been lucky enough to sit in close to 32 different carriers' offices last year alone. Okay. Where I worked with hundreds. And when I say hundreds, I worked with hundreds of recruiters.
That's right.
And so I got to actually witness firsthand and work with them. Not only did I get to see opportunities and coach them on opportunities to actually get better in those areas, but they actually helped coach me as well. So every single time that I got to go to another carrier, I was able to implement some of their best practices.
All right, let me ask you both this. And this is kind of what your gut feeling is, because there's no way to actually quantify this. But how much do you feel the average fleet is actually helping their recruiters get better at talking to drivers?
You're asking Seth that, right?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think if you were to survey...
Asking the tough questions on Digging Deeper.
That's right. I think if you were to survey the fleets, the vast majority would feel like they are.
Right.
right?
There's a feeling that we're giving them the tools.
I mean, I would throw it at 60 to 70% probably feel like, yeah, we provide consistent ongoing coaching to our recruiters. But then observation wise, once you get in there, this is just my 2 cents here, but it's probably down closer to 30 to 40% provided on a consistent basis. What do you think, Scott?
Would you agree or would you?
I would agree with them, absolutely. And it's that continuous coaching that's important as well. Anybody can come in for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days and coach you and your team on, hey, here's best practices, here's how to do it, or identify areas of the process that need improvement. Okay. And share best practices, but actually to continually do that throughout the years as important. So yes, I agree.
All right. So I think we've talked about, there's one blind spot there of how much our fleets actually have a practice of continually helping their recruiters, right? And there's probably a little bit of a blind spot there. I think you've talked about another blind spot, and I know you did at the Solution Summit, where you actually asked if you could call people's recruiting departments.
Absolutely.
Which was stunning, And so how much of a blind spot do fleets actually have into what they think their recruiters are doing on the phone, like how they're performing and how they're going about things, and what they're actually doing?
Okay, I'll speak on that firsthand.
Okay.
So I led and worked with the carrier for close to 20 years, and we had 68 recruiters, and I could actually hear them on the floor when I'm walking on the floor, and I knew they were just doing great. I just knew it in my heart.
Right.
I could hear them on the phone. I couldn't hear the actual driver on the other end of the phone, but I just knew I had the best working with us, and we did. We had some top line recruiters out there. But after I started listening to phone calls, and this was years ago, it really was, how do I say, jaw dropping, because I realized that we really weren't. They were practicing doing the same thing over every day, but we weren't adjusting our shot group. We weren't truly adjusting how we were approaching every single call and doing it differently. So we couldn't coach to it.
Right.
I was just listening to one side of the call. And the problem is it's so time consuming, David.
Mm-hmm. But I will add, based off the math, it's probably the most important thing you could be spending time on.
There's no doubt about it. But when I go back to the time-consuming part and why most folks don't do it, or why I didn't do it 20 years ago, is because it ate up so much of my time.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because you have to listen to the calls. It's really easy to hit a button and measure the number of calls a recruiter makes.
Right.
It's so much more challenging to actually listen to the call and coach to it. Coach to the calls.
And we know in this business, I mean, it's 24/7, 365, right? So trucking never stops. And so we carry that mentality as we should throughout the whole business. So taking anybody away from their job was like, oh, you can't do that. I mean, you don't have time for that. They need to hit the phones. We got to be hiring drivers. But by making that investment, when they are on the phones, that's where they see the big return.
Absolutely.
Now,
and I go
Seth,
back.
Well, Seth, I know you have one analogy that you used to use a lot.
Yeah.
And it was the idea of typing. And you say, and I'll just go ahead and give it, are you getting better at typing? Or how often do you type, right? And it's like, well, every day I type. Are you getting better at it? No, not really. Why? Well, you're just repeating the same things you learned when you started typing.
Right.
You just have the first, and what you said is, same thing with recruiters is a lot of times, yes, they do it every day. They've been doing it for 10 years, some of these guys, but are they just repeating the first year 10 times, essentially? Yeah. And that's where we get back to continual coaching. So let's jump into that idea of continually coaching. If I say, all right, I believe you guys, I believe the math, this is the most important thing I could be spending time on. Clearly, where do you start? I'm going to start. I have provided some coaching, but I want to get into this idea of providing continual coaching and improvement. The first thing I need to do as a director is, either of you can take it.
All right.
Call Scott Maldonado.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
No.
Took my answer. So I think it's a two-pronged approach.
Right.
I think just like sales, you need emotional buy-in and logical buy-in, right? So the logical piece says, just pull the numbers and look at them. Right. Look at the pipeline. Look at where drivers are getting stuck in statuses, right, within the ATS. That's how you get the logical buy-in. The emotional buy-in is listen to the phone calls. Let's sit down together and listen to phone calls. And it won't be me saying, hey, that was maybe not the best call I've ever heard, right? It's, hey, what did you think about that phone call? And the person listening to themselves goes, Okay.
Well,
I didn't realize I did that.
That's a really good point, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Is you talked about getting buy-in, and for some reason I didn't think about getting the buy-in from the recruiter, but that's probably a big part of your job is like getting the person that you're offering the training to buy into the process of there is room for improvement. Is that true?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that I realized early in my career, and I'll go back 25 years ago, is what I thought I knew what the team that I led needed, that, the training or the mentoring and coaching they needed. I felt like I knew what they needed when I really didn't. They know what they need. So me actually getting their buy-in, I truly had to get them to trust and believe what I was coaching them on.
Right.
Right. So I do that every single week when I'm on the road. If I walk into, I'll be with the carrier later on this afternoon and the remainder of the week. And my first 4 hours is actually buying in, getting that buy-in from the recruiters. So once they once I build that rapport and they start to trust me, then they'll start to do the things that I'm asking them to do differently. Okay. I'm not asking them to change their entire approach. Right. I'm just asking them to shift their grip on their racket. Right. Just a tad bit. They already know how to play tennis. Right. I just want them to shift their grip.
Well, and we're all married men, and like trying to convince your spouse of something, you don't go, you need to change everything. That's a really good point of saying we're not making everything changing here. You gotta put it in a way. It's like we're just gonna make this slight adjustment here,
But let me add to that.
Yeah.
It's also important to understand, I think, and to learn, and I've learned this again throughout the years, is that people intake the information differently.
Correct.
Some people, they want to the point, tell me how it is, tell me where I need to be fixed, and I'll go work on it. Right. Some people need visuals. They want to see it. Some people are more analytical, where you have to show them and share with them on what does it mean to them as an organization. Right. Right. And some are just feeling. They want to feel good. They want to feel that they know you care as a coach, as a mentor, and they'll do it for you.
So I think that we can clearly say that the first step, if we want to take this juggernaut on, we're going to be better at coaching our recruiters. The first step is we have to figure out how to get emotional buy-in from the recruiters
100%.
That they believe in this. All right. What would step 2 be?
So to get their buy-in, you have to uncover what their needs are, because every recruiter is not the same. One recruiter might be strong in one area and might be challenged in another. So you have to be able to have the skill set to coach those recruiters in their different areas.
Right.
So being able to identify where they need the help and where you could service them and help them out is important. So identifying where you can help them and then aligning what you have to offer, your skill set. And for me, I call it, you can say, take me to HR if you like, but it's a God-given gift that God gave me.
Right.
That has to interact with
It's
people.
not where I thought that was going when you said, take me to HR.
Well,
it was God-given gifts.
Well, in trucking, it's okay to cuss somebody else, just not as okay or as frowned upon to talk about God. I don't know. But it's crazy. Cut that.
No, we got to keep that one in for sure.
But I mean, that's what it is. It's a gift that he's blessed me with to be able to read a room and to understand people.
Well, I agree. I've seen
to get that buy-in, and so you have to be able to use that as a leader.
So if step 1 is create buy-in among the recruiters, step 2 is essentially identify the individual needs of each recruiter.
That's right.
And the way to do that, I assume, is kind of blending what you were talking about earlier. Is you have to sit down individually, emotionally listen to the calls, and let them give their feedback on the call. Correct?
That's right. You'll spend 60% of the time actually listening to calls, and I made that number up, but 60% of the time I'm listening to calls and tailoring my coaching to each individual recruiter. 40% of the time is the content of what I'm going to coach on.
Right. Step 3, what are we looking to do next?
Address those needs. Once we've identified what each individual recruiter needs, it's then working with them on an individual basis.
What does that look like? Give me a little more on what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying before.
Got real busy with my hands there.
Yeah, you did. It was distracting out of the corner of my eye. But it goes back to what you were saying before, is if you give them 20 things to work on, they're really working on nothing. Right. So you narrow it down to the 1 or 2 things that really are going to move the needle.
Okay.
And once you've narrowed it down, you begin to work on it. One thing that Scott does that I love and respect is he doesn't just teach people like, hey, you need to do this. He jumps on the phone and shows them.
Yeah, I've witnessed that one time.
He'll do the calling.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of is the next step. Like show them how it's done. Give them an example. So you can probably speak to that more, Scott, on why why you feel it's so necessary to actually jump on and make calls with them.
And I'll go back to my military days. This is almost 30 years ago when I joined the military. When I became an NCO or a sergeant, I knew as a soldier that for me to follow my squad leader, I had to believe and trust in them.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to do that, I had to see them kick that door down.
Right.
I had to see them bridge the gap. I had to see them do the things that they were asking me to do. So when I coach and I work with recruiters, after I get that buy-in, that trust, and they understand that I'm there for them, right? Then I demonstrate what I coach on. So that there's so many people in the industry, no matter what you do for a living, that want to trust it before they try it.
The nerdy version of that is Luke has to witness Yoda lift the starfighter out of the swamp. He wants to see that the mentor can actually do the things that he's talking about.
That's right. In
case there's any nerdy people out there that need the nerdy version of that.
Not in trucking. There's no nerdy people in trucking. I can guarantee that.
I've met a few at R-Squared. For sure.
Yeah, but that's it. Once they see you actually do it, then they'll do it. Then they say, okay, wow, it can be done. So many people want to capitalize on trucking companies when there's either a driver shortage, which there has been for 30 years, right? But is there truly a driver shortage? Let's ask ourselves that. Right?
Well, we have data on that as well.
Or is there a shortage of people that know how to recruit and retain drivers?
Probably a little bit of both would be my vote.
No, I've done them. I'm not going to say I've done them all, but 20-something years ago when I got behind the wheel and started driving truck from a driver manager to, to operations, I guess you can look at it from both ways. Maybe there is a driver shortage and maybe there is some opportunity for us on the other side. But there are two jobs, and I'll say this, I learned it from a mentor of mine years ago, Jerry Moyes. He had said it, he's a young 20-year-old kid. And he says, Scott, there's two roles in our company, and there's drivers and there's driver support. That's it.
Yeah.
That is it. Absolutely.
Correct. Is there a fourth step or is it rinse and repeat from there on? Would you say there's a fourth one?
I could add to it.
I say yes.
Okay. Well, I'll hear yours and then I'll decide if I want to put a little spice on it.
So, once you demonstrate, hey, here's how we can go about it, and here's the type of results we can get when we go about it this way. Now it's their turn.
That's right.
Right. So now you've got to have a window of time where it's like, try this out.
Right.
And then we'll follow up and see how that's going. And maybe you knock that skill out of the park and we can move on to the next one. Or maybe it's like, let's keep working on this one until you get it down.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it. He's spot on. Yeah. And I call it in the call when we talk about perfecting the call, it's at the end of it all. I summarize and I gain agreement.
Right.
So with the recruiters I work with, I summarize everything that we coached on, and I gain their agreement. And how I do that is I get them to do it.
Yeah.
I get them to actually do it. They practice it. They do the same thing. They're going to see me fall on my face 2 or 3 times during the day because we're going to call 15 to 20 drivers in front of the entire class.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to be successful on every one, but we're going to actually see them demonstrate it.
Okay. Now, is there a fifth step? Is it like look back and see where we are, keep score? What would the fifth step be? So he said
it with the follow-up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you want to go more into detail, but that.
Yeah, no, I think it is just once they've mastered something, it's picking the next thing. And that's the whole idea of continuous coaching.
Oh, good point.
It's not like, hey, you got that one thing down, you're good to go forever. It's now what's the next thing? There's always going to be a next thing that we can get better at.
It's almost like marriage, huh? Just like our wives.
Right back to where we were.
Well, honey, I came home on time. Right?
Yeah.
We made a paycheck.
If only they'd let us work on 1 or 2 things at a time.
That's right.
Cut that.
Yeah, definitely cut that.
For sure, cut that. Now, all right. So we kind of laid out a pretty good process here. If we want to take this seriously, we got to get emotional buy-in from our recruiters. We got to assess the individual needs of each recruiter, provide one-on-one coaching and examples through our own action. Then it was allow them to actually put it into action what we've been working on, and then follow up, rinse, repeat. Give them start back and do the whole thing again.
Do you mind if I touch on before the first thing?
Go.
Okay, so we talked about the steps, and everybody likes to put steps behind something because it's easy to retain, remember, and probably, implement. Before we even get the emotional buy-in from the recruiters, you actually have to have the leadership bought in.
Well,
the leadership has to buy in that, hey, look, man, I might not be the right person to do this coaching.
Right.
25 years ago, I was not the right person to coach our recruiters and our driver services and our operations folks.
Right.
25 years ago. So I had to bring somebody in to do it. Same thing around your house, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you have a plumb, well, you build houses from the ground floor up. But let me
David
move over to
could do
Seth.
it, but yeah.
So if Seth has
I
a
can barely do
plumbing
anything.
leak, are you going to fix it yourself? You'll probably get on YouTube, but you'll call someone in who's a professional to do it.
Yeah,
Right.
David. Yeah.
Absolutely, call David to do it.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with recruiting. You know, when I was a vice president of recruiting, I might
Yeah.
not have been the right person to do it.
And to something Seth was saying earlier, you have to get the buy-in from the upper management, because you're asking them to take time away from being on the phone with drivers. We're actually going to take time away from that to get better at it, which they have to buy into that to see the value.
Absolutely. And I believe whoever, whether you bring somebody from, it doesn't matter who you use. I strongly believe that whoever you bring in to work with you and your team understands trucking in a whole. They understand recruiting, they understand operations, they understand safety. I'm not saying they need to understand actually how to turn a wrench.
Right.
They don't need to know how to replace a turbo,
Yeah.
but they do have to understand those operational questions, because they do come up.
Call Scott Maldonado at 1-800.
I know zero.
No. All right. So we've kind of laid out the process, I think, really well here. So I just want to end it by giving like a few quick tips of when you guys have dug in and to see like where are the issues, what are the things we can get better on. Let's list maybe the 1, 2, maybe 3 if we have time. What are the biggest things that you tend to discover when you start digging into phone calls to see where each individual recruiter has room for improvement? What's the biggest thing that always comes out?
One thing I think we've uncovered with the whole listening in show that we do,
Right,
is sometimes we'll put a question counter up. It's the lack of asking questions. We let the driver ask all the questions, which is fine. We want to make sure to, that they feel good and that they feel like they got all the information they need to make a good decision. But that emotional piece of it, you really can't get that unless you're getting to know the driver by asking questions. So to me, that I would say that's the biggest thing that I've seen, is not asking enough questions.
right.
I'd love to touch on that if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And that's why I moved it to him, because he's so elegant the way he
Right.
speaks. I'm like, he'll give me something.
Don't sell
right?
yourself short.
So he says asking questions, and I was coaching a company earlier this week, Monday and today actually. I'm on break from it.
Yeah.
And one thing that I wrote up on the wall this morning was, don't worry about being perfect, right? Worry about getting the participation.
Right.
So get participation from the driver in the conversation, not perfecting the call.
Right.
You want participation. And how you do that is not by having all the right answers.
Right.
So many recruiters, so many of it, even myself, I'm nervous sitting here thinking to myself, am I going to have the right answers? Will I give them what they're looking for?
Right.
But in reality, it's not about having the right answers.
Right.
What's more powerful is asking the right questions.
That's a really good point.
And so do this.
And like you said, getting participation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To his ticket take, how'd you call that? A ticket when you
Question
The
ticker.
ticker.
the ticker.
Yeah.
I do that.
It
all
didn't
the
go
time.
anywhere. In the show, it just questions, and it was like 0, 0,
Yeah.
0.
With carriers I work with, the recruiters will tell you, I say, okay, write down the number of questions and the questions asked.
Right.
And majority of the time, not always, right? Majority of the times the questions are this. There's 3 questions, 4 tops.
Right.
And they are, where do you live? What's your zip code? How much experience you got?
Right.
Right. And then it's, we offer this, this, and this, and this. Are you interested?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So what would be number 2? The first thing is just really the lack of asking questions, but another way of putting it is asking the person on the other phone to participate in the phone call. And what would be the second thing that you tend to uncover when you're diving into phone calls? The second biggest, I won't call it a mistake, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's approaching. The mistake is approaching every phone call, every person, I should say, the same way. And it's not realizing that you have an individual on there that you may or may not have spoken with before. So treat them like an individual, because people can get caught up in, here's the same 4 questions I ask every time. Now, if they're super solid questions that lead to other questions, that might be okay. But I would say that's the other biggest mistake, is you just get in this routine and you stop treating people like individuals, and it's just another phone call. And that doesn't make anybody feel good. That leads to a bad experience.
Absolutely. And to those questions, when you ask those same cookie cutter questions, you're going to get cookie cutter answers, and it really gets you nowhere. I believe strongly, and I coach on this, is you have to be able to align what your company offers to what they're asking.
Right.
So what I'll do, and it's actually what I do when I do coaching and mentoring, is we'll write down everything that the carrier offers, all of their features, all their benefits, however you want to title it. And then when we have a call, we'll write down what did the driver want. And up top, we'll say, what problem did you solve for the driver at the end of the call? And most of the time it'll be, hey, the driver was looking for a job.
Right.
No, that's not the problem.
Little deeper.
Right. So
dig a little deeper.
He or she was interested in this, and this, and I shared this, and this. And when you come to find out is you're not sharing everything about your organization on that call.
Right.
You're sharing what's relevant to the driver. So being able to align what you have to offer to what the driver needs or is looking for.
All right. And then finally, and we'll close out with this, the third thing that you tend to uncover when you're digging into phone calls. So first we got the kind of the lack of questions, and you said it, getting participation. And then the second would be understanding the individual, and you kind of expounded upon that to say, uncovering the pain points so that you can align the rest of the conversation to those pain points, so that you're giving relevant information, not just the cookie cutter information. And then what would you say is the third one?
I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to go back and touch on that one. Is that okay?
Go.
So when we talked about aligning the solutions and aligning what you have, it's so common for us, and I was guilty of it.
Yeah.
Hey man, we have 15,000 trucks, and then I'd move on to what type of truck we had.
Yeah.
What does 15,000 trucks mean to the driver?
Right.
So being able to say, hey, look, I'm working with the carrier today, and let's pretend they have 300 trucks.
Right.
And the recruiter says, hey, we have 300 trucks, and then moves on. Well, wait a minute. That means nothing to the driver. Hey, look, we have 300 trucks, and what this means to you is we're large enough to keep you moving, and that job stability is there for you and your wife, Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we're also still small enough, right, that you can walk into our office and we're going to know your name. We're going to know who you are, but you're also going to know ours, right? So why they're important to the driver is important, I believe. So that's what I have to add.
And what would you add?
Well, can I move on to my number 3?
Yeah, move on to number 3.
That one?
Well, I feel like that was kind of his transition.
We're stacking.
Okay.
We're stacking.
It's not a real,
All right.
It might have been 3A or 2A. I don't know where we are in the outline.
Fair enough. So my number 3 is biggest mistakes is ending the call without clear direction. So if we're doing all these good things in the beginning and the middle of the call, how does the call end? And hopefully it's with us going to an application, right? And so many times, though, we listen to calls or we hear it where it's like, thank you, the driver says, thank you for the information, and then tries to end the call. Well, what are next steps? When are we talking again? What do we need to do next? If that's not established, that call could become not meaningless, but it may not progress as quickly as it could and should.
Yeah, great point.
All right. So this is the time where we do our big summary. All right. And I'm going to let you take it. The idea is, why is it so important that we are coaching our recruiters?
I mean, it's almost like driver retention. There's no one secret pill to it. There really isn't. Financially, it's important to the organization. If you want to outlast your competition, because you're never going to beat anybody in trucking, right? You're going to outlast them,
right? So
you have to reduce your operating ratio, and how recruiters do that is by improving their conversion ratios, right? So definitely, it's a financial gain for your organization and the longevity of your company, so you stick around and your kids can work here.
Right.
That's one reason why you should coach them. Another reason why you should coach them, and not in this order, is the experience for the driver. Right. Who wants the experience? And people have talked about this in the past. When you go to Chick-fil-A, you love the experience. Would you agree?
I know people that do.
Okay, go ahead. Would you not agree?
I'm a primal. I only eat meat and organs.
So many people love to go to Chick-fil-A because of the experience, right?
Right.
And they talk about it. You go to McDonald's, the experience is not the same.
No, it's not.
So we're selling an experience, or we're offering an experience to these drivers. And so you should coach your recruiters, right, to improve the experience that driver has, because if it's a negative experience, they're going to run over and tell 13, 15, 17 different drivers at the TA and pilot.
Right.
If it's a positive experience, they might tell 2 or 3 or 4, right? But that's the experience you want to leave with the driver. So I would say it's definitely a financial long-term play for your organization.
Right.
And again, it's the experience you're leaving with the driver. You want to take care of that driver.
You know, one thing I always tell my football players, I'm a football coach. One thing I always tell them is when you act like a jerk on the field, people don't go away saying that guy was a jerk. They go away saying those guys over at the school I coach at, I won't say the name, but those guys over at TCS, they're jerks. So I imagine with recruiters, it's the same thing. If my first interaction with someone is not good, they're not going to say, hey, that random recruiter I talked to is a jerk. They go tell everyone, hey, those guys over there at that fleet, they're jerks.
That's great. I never thought of that way. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They're not going to look at one player on the field, right? They're going to look at the uniform.
Yep.
Those guys. Your uniform is the name on your truck in the trailer, right?
That's
nice, man.
All right. Well, I think that was one of the best ones we've ever done. So let's close it off there.